Okay. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our press conference with an update on the body-worn camera program. I want to welcome members of the press who have gathered here at the George Howard Building and those streaming on Facebook Live. Thank you for joining us for this important announcement for our community. My name is Maureen Evans-Arthurs, and I serve as the Director of Government Affairs and Strategic Partnerships for Howard County Executive Calvin Ball. After hearing from our county executive and law enforcement officials, we will take questions from the press. And now I would like to introduce our Howard County executive, Dr. Calvin Ball.
Thank you, Maureen. This past year, across our nation and in our backyard, we've heard the calls for more transparency, justice, and accountability to ensure strong relationships between our community and our law enforcement agencies. When I served on the County Council in 2015, I sponsored legislation establishing a committee within our Howard County Police Department's Citizens Advisory Council. This committee was tasked with conducting a community policing report and creating recommendations and best practices for encouraging officer and community safety. Out of the 173-page report, the usage of body-worn cameras was the number one recommendation. I supported it then, and I support it now. However, the suggestion at the time was to delay implementation due to the costs. The pilot program, which launched in the summer of 2017 and concluded in the fall of 2018, found three major barriers to instituting the program. In addition to budgetary concerns, a lack of adequate storage space, and staffing. In February of 2020, the Howard County Council unanimously approved my legislation to enter into a 10-year agreement to lease more than 32,000 square feet at the Oracle Building on Columbia Gateway Drive for our police department. The agreement, which was months in the making, would address the initial area of capacity. It has always been my goal to develop solutions and overcome the previously cited challenges for implementing body-worn cameras for our public safety team and our community. And that's why during June of 2020, we announced that the county would revisit the initial report of the body-worn camera pilot program that was completed in 2017. Despite the uncertainty of the impact that COVID-19 would have on our county's revenue, and in the absence of state funding for the body-worn camera program, I committed to eliminate the previously cited barriers and fully funding the program in fiscal year 2022. After our proposed budget was filed, we learned that the state-mandated maintenance of effort funding level for our school system was significantly higher than anticipated. This forced difficult decisions among the priorities. In addition, the County Council voted to place all remaining funding proposed for body-worn cameras into contingency at the end of the budgetary process. But when faced with these challenges, we focused on solutions. Today, I'm pleased to announce that we are filing a budget amendment to request that the County Council move all of the funding out of contingency. Additionally, we've allocated approximately $1.6 million in American Rescue Plan funding that can support the implementation of our body-worn camera program on October 5th the day after the County Council will vote on our budget amendment to release county funds from contingency to support full implementation of this program. Combined with the $1 million preliminarily funded for equipment and licensing set aside during the budget process, and the nearly $500,000 in contingency, this additional $1.6 million will go towards fully funding this program immediately following the County Council approval of our budget amendment. Now, this $3.1 million will go toward hiring 26 essential positions across our police department, state's attorney's office, and sheriff's office. 600 cameras for approximately 300 Howard County police officers. Expanded storage capacity and acquiring the necessary software. And finally, procuring additional equipment for deputies within the sheriff's department. After communicating our plan with council members over the last several days, I'm hopeful that we will secure the votes needed to release the remaining funding from the contingency reserved fund and serve as continued partners to ensure support of both our community and our law enforcement officials. I understand this has been a long and sometimes frustrating process, roughly 6 years in the making. I commend and respect those in our community who have engaged in a productive community conversation and advocated for support of best practices in community policing. I continue to maintain my ongoing commitment to fostering an inclusive and safe community for all. And seeing this program come to fruition in fiscal year 22 has remained a priority. I want to express my sincere gratitude to Chief Lisa Myers, Sheriff Marcus Harris, and State's Attorney Rich Gibson for their leadership and ongoing partnership to successfully and fully implement this essential program for our community. Thank you.
Thank you, County Executive. And now to discuss the impact of this legislation on the Howard County Police Department, I'd like to introduce Police Chief Lisa Myers.
Thank you, Maureen. Good morning, everyone. I am here today to express my gratitude to County Executive Calvin Ball for his commitment to bringing body-worn cameras to Howard County. I'm also honored to stand here today with my law enforcement partners, Sheriff Marcus Harris and State's Attorney Rich Gibson. This project has been a long time in the making, as the executive has indicated. A few years ago, we started a pilot program in the county which clearly demonstrated that body-worn camera technology is a benefit to our officers and to the community alike. At the time, there were budgetary challenges, but today, the county executive is making clear his commitment to our officers and to the community to ensure we are able to provide true accountability. Over a period of a few months, we'll be training personnel as well as acquiring the equipment needed to launch this program. When the process is completed, we will have 300 uniformed Howard County officers wearing body-worn camera. Police accountability is the fundamental tenet of our department. Integrity is the first word on the banner beneath our patch, and it is the first priority, and it is the highest expectation that I have for every Howard County police officer. County Executive Ball's commitment today at taking another look at the funding is just another reflection of his support for the outstanding relationships we have built with our community. We are looking ahead and always exploring new ways to offer the best possible service to our community. We remain committed to respecting and protecting all citizens of this county. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Myers. And now I'd like to welcome State's Attorney Gibson to outline his support of the legislation for the State's Attorney's Office.
Good morning. The State's Attorney's Office has always been a steadfast supporter of body-worn camera. Furthermore, we've been upfront about the costs associated with implementing this program correctly. We know that body-worn camera is a tool that has the ability to protect the truth of what occurs in our community. It has the power to bring greater accountability and transparency to encounters with law enforcement, whether the wrongdoer is a member of the public or a public servant like a police officer. We've had numerous conversations, hearings, and presentations with the County Council over the last several months and the public to make them aware of the specific legal requirements and the fiscal cost associated with the program. In 2021, we've had 4 County Council hearings related to body-worn camera. We provided numerous written submissions of answers to the Council's questions in order to have the full funding released for personnel from contingency. We've also had presentations to the County Council members and the County Executive to show them the technology and the limits of the technological advancements that we've had, so they have an idea of separating fact from fiction about what exists as relates to body-worn camera. At this point, I want to express gratitude. I'm grateful to County Executive Calvin Ball in treating the body-worn camera program as a priority. I want to thank my law enforcement partners, Police Chief Lisa Myers and Sheriff Marcus Harris, for being steadfast in their commitment and their collaborative efforts in getting this program underway. I also want to express gratitude to community members and organizations such as PATH, Howard County Police Accountability Task Force, and requesting that the County Council release the full funding from contingency so we can hire the requisite personnel to properly implement this program. Funds that equate to 0.2% of the total proposed budget for the county this year. Thank you again, Calvin Ball, County Executive Ball, for finding innovative and creative ways to get this program started as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, State's Attorney Gibson. And now I would like to introduce Sheriff Harris to discuss the impact on the Sheriff's Department.
I'm going to be extremely brief. First, I'd like to thank County Executive Calvin Ball and his office for his support in the body-worn camera program. I want to thank him for his attempt to move this program forward sooner rather than later. I'd like to thank my partners, Chief Lisa Myers and State's Attorney Rich Gibson, for their hard work and dedication over this long process. I am 100% in favor of body-worn cameras. I think that it will create trust and transparency between the citizens of Howard County along with law enforcement. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Sheriff Harris. And that concludes our formal remarks. We'll now open the floor for questions from the press. Please remember to speak loudly and succinctly so that I can hear your questions and repeat it back for those joining us on social media.
Now that money is fully appropriated, will funds be available to keep it going, or will it be absorbed by the police department and the state's attorney's office budgets?
Okay, the question was, now that the money has been appropriated, will there be enough funding to keep it going, or will it be shifted to the police department and the state's attorney's office to absorb?
Great question. I think we've heard from our community that this is a priority, and I think that we have demonstrated throughout my time as an elected official serving Howard County and our public safety partners that it's a priority for us. And so we fully intend in each upcoming budget cycle to push for sufficient funding to fully implement the body-worn camera program moving forward.
I have a question for the county executive
Sure.
related to the timing of this. I know that it sounds like it's been bumped of implementation. However, some of the neighboring jurisdictions, I know Anne Arundel County will have all of its officers fully outfitted by middle of next month. Baltimore County has had these cameras in place for about 5 years now. I know you've been pushing for this since you were on the county council. So are you satisfied with the timeline that Howard County is on?
Okay, so the question was asking in regards to the timeline and a comparative analysis of the other jurisdictions who have had programs in place or are currently working on implementing their programs next month.
When it comes to our community not only being safe but feeling safe, we definitely embrace the fierce urgency of now. However, we know that the state has mandated body-worn cameras for the largest jurisdictions by the summer of 2023. So while I'm glad that we are ahead of the state-mandated timeline, I always would prefer for things to be moving forward faster. I'm quite pleased, however, in hopes in working with the county council that we will be able to, in the beginning of October, begin to fully implement ahead of the state mandate.
I also wanted to ask, we're seeing jurisdictions use American Rescue Plan funds for a lot of different uses. I'm wondering why the county chose to use from this bucket of funding for this purpose.
Sure. The question for those at home on social media is why the use of ARP funding or American Rescue Plan funding for this particular program?
So much like the CARES Act, the guidance has been evolving. However, as the council passed our budget and we began the start of this fiscal year last month, we have continued to work on innovative solutions to address all of the needs. I was very pleased that we addressed the spacing need, and we were working on addressing the staffing and the budgetary needs. And so I think as we're looking at usage of the American Rescue Plan funding, this fit just right.
Okay.
While
Yes.
it's great that a body camera is going to be in place, it's another thing on releasing it in a timely way. What is that criteria going to be based on? How soon will the public get to see it after it's captured?
Okay, so for those at home, it was in regards to the body camera footage. Once that's acquired, how quickly it will be available to the public to view.
So in terms of the release of the body-worn camera footage, we have to evaluate that in light of the actual investigation and the case. There are times when we're investigating cases, we have to ensure that we have informational advantage. If you put information out to the public too quickly, it impacts our ability to discern truth from fiction related to what a person says they observed. And so it's going to be a case-by-case evaluation. There are times, and we'll work collaboratively with the police department and the sheriff's department, but there will be case-by-case evaluations related to the facts unique to that case to decide whether it's appropriate to release the footage rapidly or whether we need to keep that sequestered so as to preserve the ability to properly prosecute the case, or not prosecute the case, but properly handle the case.
Is there, follow-up, is there a criteria that you're going to model this after? Different jurisdictions have different criteria. Is there one that you all are looking at?
No, it's a matter of when you evaluate a case, if we put information out to the public, let's say there was someone who was killed via a shooting, right? And they were shot 2 times in the head, unfortunately, right? You have people who, we want to discern what people actually saw. So if a witness came forward and didn't know what we have, we know what we have. If a witness is talked to and they don't have that information and they say the person was shot in the foot or the leg, we know that either they perceived it incorrectly or they didn't see what they said they saw. If we put the information out to the public, then that impacts the our ability to evaluate the truth. And so it is done on a case-by-case basis. There's not like a standard. There's not one uniform standard. It's a case-by-case basis based upon the facts presented in that particular case.
And finally, just one more follow-up. What do you say to those who honestly believe that criteria will mean that camera footage will never be released because it will always be under investigation?
No, investigations, while they don't have a timeline, while there's not like investigations take as long as they take to do them thoroughly. The fact of the matter is that at the conclusion of the investigation, whether the State's Attorney's Office chooses to go forward and charge or chooses not to go forward and charge, at the conclusion of the investigation, once we reach the conclusion, at that point in time, we can and will, of course, release, or we will not stand in the way of releasing any information to the public. We may release information sooner if all of the investigative steps that might be negatively impacted by that release have already occurred. So it's time-based, but the information will be shared with the community. It's a question of, is it shared immediately? And we live in a world where people want stuff like snappy, and we have an instant gratification world, but that's not the way investigations work. There are times when we'll be able to release it rapidly. There'll be times where it may take a little bit longer, but it will eventually be released.
Mr. Gibson, a question for you. We deal with this all the time, but for people at home, they may not understand why you would need 13 more people in your office with implementing this program. Can you explain that a little bit to the people at home?
Yeah, absolutely. So the State's Attorney's Office is legally required to produce all evidence that would show that the defendant committed a crime, that we intend to use to show they committed a crime, and any evidence which would negate the fact that they committed a crime. We're also required to release all evidence that would undermine the credibility of a witness we intend to rely on at court. So that's a ton of information. Body-worn camera is another medium of information that we have in relation to police reports, witness statements, cell phone video, security video, a ton of different metrics that we look at. We have to evaluate all that, and we have a legal obligation to turn that over. We have 11,000 cases, and in every case, there's the police interact with the community, and when they do, there's information that's there that might need to be redacted as well. So, for instance, if you show someone a license, like let's say an officer stops you for driving, the officer says you're driving drunk, and you show your license. That license information is going to be caught on their camera. That's not something that necessarily we want the whole world to know. We might have to redact that. If they have to go to a hospital, the code to get into the hospital might be captured on the camera. The world shouldn't know that, otherwise the hospitals aren't secure. We have to redact that. So it's very time intensive, but there's a lot of information that we have to review and properly process within a timely manner. And we operate under strict timelines. We have 30 days to decide what we're going to charge, which is obviously the body-worn camera will be helpful in deciding whether we charge or not. And then we have 30 days from the time the defendant is charged to get all that information about whether they did the crime or didn't do the crime out to their defense counsel after the either arraignment or entry of appearance in court. So it gets legal, but the bottom line is it's very time consuming.
A lot of evidence. So would you say that this makes your job easier or harder?
It makes seeking the truth somewhat easier, but you have to wade through it. You have to process it, and that takes bodies and time. And time is a constant. It can't be mitigated. It can't be reduced. Some people think you can watch the video and fast forward. You can't, because you might miss an important detail that impacts whether you're charging someone appropriately or not. And what's our paramount concern is getting it right and complying with the law. That's our paramount concern. You're welcome.
There's been a lot of discussion just now about crimes being committed. Would an exception be made if alleged police misconduct is claimed? In terms of the body cam. In terms of releasing body cam footage, if a claim of police misconduct, would that be an exception to the rule of waiting until?
No. If there was police misconduct and that police misconduct was criminal, we would be charging that officer. And so that's still a crime, potentially. We have to evaluate all the evidence and determine if it's a crime and then decide if we're going to charge. And then that officer is in the position of any other defendant. They're entitled to any information we have that would show they didn't do it, or any information that we want to use that shows that they did, in fact, commit the crime. And so if a crime is alleged, this sequence of legal events is triggered, regardless of whether an officer commits it or a civilian commits it. It's the same standard for everyone.
All right, seeing no further.
Can I have an off-topic question?
Sure.
That's for the county executive. Now that the FDA has given preliminary approval to vaccines, instead of saying it's experimental, is he evaluating whether or not to require vaccinations for all county employees?
This question is related to vaccines and whether or not there will be a requirement for Howard County employees.
We're excited about the FDA approval impending for the Pfizer vaccine, and we're looking forward to hopeful approval for Moderna and Johnson & Johnson. We continue to evaluate all ways to keep people safe, and we look each day at the various metrics from our vaccination rates, which we know this is a race, vaccine versus variant, to our metrics on case count and positivity rate. And so we're continuing to work with all of our employees to not only ensure that this is a safe working environment, but also that it's safe for the public.
Does the decision make that, does the FDA decision factor into your decision-making process, and how?
Does the FDA decision factor into my decision-making process, and how? Yes, it does. I think that, number one, I'm hopeful that some people who potentially were vaccine hesitant will look at this FDA approval and be more likely to take the vaccine. And then two, I think if we were to see metrics go in a much more concerning place and we thought that it was necessary, then we would need to have that conversation with our employees. Thank you all and enjoy the rest of your day.